What's up out there? Let's go on a little bit of a rabbit hole. Now, this is the Godot game engine, and this is following a YouTube tutorial from the YouTube channel Brackies. Basically, there's an hour-long video that shows you how to develop this right here. Is that because I'm pressing up? Let's see. I have one coin. There's an enemy running around. We can go jump over it. This is all keyboard based, by the way, so it's kind of hard to. I'm not a real big fan of doing platforming on keyboard, mouse, or left, right arrows, that kind of thing. I'd prefer to use a gamepad or something like that. But there's a game. What this video does is it starts you from a blank project in Godot, runs you through everything you just saw. Adding all the little sprites to this, adding the background, adding the player, adding the enemies, the coins, the counters, all of that. And then you export it out at the very end to an exe. So I don't necessarily think the Brackies video is like some magical thing that's going to teach you all the stuff you need to know about game development. What it did for me personally was showed me how simple it was. There's a lot of complexity to this. It's not that simple, but it wasn't that complex either. You start with a blank canvas and you end up with a product you can run on any computer. Well, any computer that can run it anyway, a little executable that spits out a Godot. So I thought that was fascinating. And there was a Humble Bundle for Game Dev TV. I ended up picking that up. I'm about 2/3. There's 3 modules for the 2D section. I'm halfway through the 3rd module. I've got a bunch of stuff in there. It's a different approach than this. You actually spend, 10 to 15, 5, 10, 15 minutes per video. They've got a, I don't know how long they are. So there are a few hours of each section. There's 3 sections in the 2D part. You spend several hours and it's broken up into 5, 10, or 15-minute chunks. So I've been trying to do like, say, 30 minutes a day, something like that. 20 or 30 minutes, somewhere in there. I go do a couple of those, go until I get kind of tired of tinkering with it, and then I'm done. So I've been tinkering with this, and it's been absolutely fascinating. My background, as far as game development, is 0. As far as stuff like scripting and things like that, I've definitely messed around with VB script over the years. Not a whole lot, just enough to get some things done at work. Batch scripting and stuff like that, Windows batch scripting, various things for work and home. And then PowerShell. I've done a lot of work with PowerShell. I don't know PowerShell. Like I can just write a script that does something. I can't do that. But I know enough that I could go online, find somebody's code, a little bit of code that does what I want to do, modify it, and then get something out of it. And to be honest with you, the code in here feels, the GD script that this uses feels very much like PowerShell. So it's been a very easy to understand to get into this. Now you can do C#. I don't know anything about C#. I took a computer science class one time. I did some C programming or C++ or something, whatever it was, like 20 years ago. I don't really know it, but I've tinkered with this stuff. I've been tinkering with, I don't want to say game development, but I've been tinkering with stuff like this over just like my whole life. Like as a kid, I used to have a Tandy color computer too, and I'd get these magazines every month that had like a bunch of code into them. So you'd go bang away on your keyboard for an afternoon, and now you got a game. Like the one that I really remember the most is like a mortar game. So you had an angle, and the flatter you shot, the farther out the mortar would end up. And then you could do a shallow, the higher up it was pointed, it would fire and come down. So to get it closer, you would shoot higher. To get it further, you would shoot out. And there was like a tank that moved that would come in at you, and if it got to you before you shot it down, you'd die and stuff like that. So you had to, it was a moving target, and you had to keep adjusting the mortar. You'd fire and see where it hit and then adjust again. That was like a program I got off a magazine. I just typed in, and you'd spend a bunch of time debugging it. Sometimes the magazines would have errors in them. You had to figure out, they'd be missing a quote somewhere or a parentheses or something like that, or you'd type something wrong. So you'd have to go figure out where you typed it wrong and spend, just an afternoon tinkering with all that. And I had like a cassette recorder you could save it all into. So this isn't like anything new, but I've never actually I don't have a game that I want to develop or anything like that. This is more of just a big, deep rabbit hole that I've gotten into. So how did I get here over the last few months? Because this is just something that I've only been tinkering with for, say, 2 or 3 months, maybe. Back when we were doing all of the Last Epoch, Diablo 4 chat and all that stuff, like I was really honing in on what would I do if I developed this game? What do I like about this? What do I not like? And yeah, there's some reviewer aspects to it, but there was also some developer aspects. What would I do? There was a video I put out for Diablo 4 talking about what I would do to change the open world. And there was half of the video that I left out. And that's the part that if this were me and I was a developer, this is the game that I would make. And these are the things that I would do. I just didn't put that in the video because it's kind of irrelevant and I wasn't sure where I was going with all this, but I've been wanting to talk about this stuff because I think it's very fascinating. I think it's cool. I think anybody that has an inclination towards game development could just jump into this, learn it, and go. And that's kind of how I got here. It's murky to even me because like YouTube started recommending videos. Next thing you know, I'm following this Brackeys video. I go get the Humble Bundle package for the Game Dev TV, and like now I'm here chatting about it. Why Godot? That's probably going to be a question that comes up. Why not Unity or Unreal? And to just not dive into a ton of politics with it, those two engines are developed by corporations. Godot is basically an open source. I think it's MIT developed this. You can do what you want. You can modify the source code. Like I don't ever see that being something that I would do, but you can modify the source code if you want. You don't own the engine, but you own whatever you do with the engine. Whereas with Unity and Unreal, you're at the whim of that corporation. Now that might be fine for other corporations and it might be fine for bigger studios that have the money to absorb whatever those guys decide to do. But if you're just a little single solo dev or a small team, why would you want to get stuck with that overhead? For instance, the big example is what Unity tried doing with their runtime tax. Now, I've always heard that Unity spent a lot of time focused on mobile game development because that's where the money is. So they didn't spend as much time on the PC side of things or the console side of things. It just wasn't lucrative enough. So then they tried the runtime tax. And basically, the CEO from EA moved over to Unity and then started doing a lot of things to make money. And one of those decisions that he pushed forward was retroactively even charging a tax for every install or charging a fee for every install of a game, which if there no limitations. So it was retroactive. If you had a vendetta against another developer, you could just install that game a million times and drive them bankrupt. Like there was so many bad ideas associated with that. And there was a huge backlash and there's a lot of developers dropped Unity, said, no. And they left and they've moved over to Godot or Unreal or something else. They just straight up left. There's some that stayed, but there's a lot that left. And I got kind of caught up in that whole thing, looking at a lot of, and maybe this is where some of the YouTube recommendations came from, because I got interested in that whole thing. What do the developers think of this whole thing? And it was kind of fascinating watching a lot of developers just give the finger to Unity and move off and go to Godot or something else. And that's probably a mixture of all that. It's kind of where I got today, but that's why I don't really want to deal with Unity or Unreal either. They're both generated by big corporations. They may be industry standards, but you're at the whim of whatever that corporation decides to do. And just the EA guy got booted out or left or whatever. He's no longer with them. But he was not the only, he may have been the one that pushed that idea, but he was not the only one along that chain of command that said, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's go forward with it. You had to have the marketing people involved. You had to have all the other people on board with it in the board meetings and stuff like that. Like it wasn't just one guy that pushed all that. And like I said before about them being mostly into mobile games, yeah, that doesn't really set well with me. If I am going to develop a game and potentially that game could fall under some weird tax, then just the rules changed yesterday and I have no idea why they changed, but they did. I'm not a fan of that. And you look at what Adobe's doing with a lot of their stuff. They're catching heat left and right because they're making stupid decisions. And now you got to pay a monthly subscription for it. Like, I don't want to be a part of any of that. If I'm doing something for fun, like my YouTube channel, I pay for Paint Shop Pro because I don't want to deal with anything having to do with Photoshop. And I use different video editing software. Yeah, the industry standards, the Adobe stuff, but it's a monthly subscription. And I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to have to deal with whatever they change randomly because they feel like it, whether it's the rules that they have to play by, whether it's their fees or anything like that. No. And that's why I don't want to deal with Unity. I would have gone with Unity if it wasn't for the idiot boneheaded decisions and shooting themselves in the foot like they did. But Godot is honestly a lot more straightforward to me. I understand this a lot better. Like, I have an AutoCAD background. In a past life, I worked on AutoCAD. So moving around, panning and zooming with the middle mouse button or the middle wheel on the mouse is just normal to me. And anything that doesn't do that, I have a Paint Shop Pro, it lets me zoom, but I can't pan with the middle button like this. So that's kind of annoying. But this, I can do that. I'm used to PowerShell, so the scripting looks like PowerShell. So when I look at this application on many levels, it's been kind of a hard learning curve diving into this, but I've enjoyed it. Keep coming back to it. And I think this is a really good engine to develop on. There is a lot of 2D stuff with it. There is 3D. I got that Game Dev TV Humble Bundle thing, and there is a 3D section for it. There's some other ones that I haven't got into. I don't remember all the ones that are there. But then there's other YouTube videos where here's people developing an FPS. I think that Road to Vostok game switched from Unity over to Godot. So there's a lot of, and that game looks phenomenal. I think 3D works with this. I see this pushed as more of a 2D engine, but there is 3D. I don't know enough about 3D to dig into it. But in addition to this, I've also got this Sprite application, and this is one. This is probably a resting animation. It may not look like it makes much difference. I'd have to put this to where you can see it play one animation after another, but each one of these cells in this row is part of an animation. Each one of these is like, this is probably maybe this is the idle animation. This might be running. The third one down here. The fourth one down is a combat one where he's swinging the sword and doing something. And then this is like the death animation because he ends up flat. So I've incorporated this Sprite application, which mouse pan and zoom and everything works from the middle button. So it makes it so much easier. I use Paint Shop Pro for all my thumbnails and stuff like that. But I've been using Sprite for certain things because there's certain aspects to the editing process that work great. And I never really understood why you'd want this for pixel art. But once you start messing around with Sprite and like I can just grab this chunk and move it out of the way, like just that easy. I don't have to go into some weird, like in Paint Shop Pro, I got to tell it to go into a different command and do that stuff. Like this is generated it's specific for sprites and pixel art and stuff like this. So if I wanted, I could change the colors on this very easily. With Paint Shop Pro, it's a lot more difficult. I have to like select the region, and there's so many, I don't know, it kind of losing myself in this, but this whole game dev journey has been kind of wild. I've got new tools. So if I wanted to animate stuff for videos, if I wanted to do a little bit of animation, I've been kicking around the idea. I found a place where you can get sprites that are free. People develop them and you just use them how you want. You can bring them in, change their colors, change the animation slightly and have something new. I thought even if I don't do an actual game develop a game, I've still got, in the process of all this rabbit hole that I dove into, I still have Sprite to tinker around with and do animations with if I want to do it for a video. If I ever got far enough and worked with this, I could have a product to sell as a game or something like that. You know, that's kind of intriguing too. What would I do if I wanted to develop a game? I'm going to save that for another video. I do have some ideas, but if you're climbing Mount Everest and there's like driving up to the base camp and then loading up at base camp, I'm still probably driving too. Like I'm not anywhere. I have no depth in this at all. And maybe I just don't do anything with it. Maybe this is a cool little detour and I get like this video and talk about it and say how cool it is. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this whole thing. I have some game ideas, and if I ever get into it really far and start working on it, I will do some kind of development log for it. But I want to actually make sure that I'm serious about doing it before I don't want to like start a series and be like, hey, check out this cool thing I'm doing, and then do like 1 or 2 videos, get bored with it, and say, no, I'm done. But at the same time, if I start doing something like that, I could see myself continuing with it because I've already started, and now I just keep putting one foot in front of the other. So I don't know. What's the takeaway from this video? For me personally, what I would say to people who are potential game developers, or if you're interested in it or something like that, the Godot game engine is, in my opinion, very straightforward, fairly easy. There's a lot of resources. Game Dev TV, I'm not gonna like shill out on them, but I've really enjoyed their approach to how they've laid out their course. If you can understand how to take what they teach and do your own thing with it, like you can't just take that and copy it. You have to know how to morph what they teach you into your own understanding and stuff like that. Like if you can do all that, I think the Game Dev TV is a fantastic resource. The Brackeys channel is really cool. I think it's more of a basic, here's your intro. It's kind of a gateway drug kind of thing. And then if you want to get further down there, I think there's some other resources that do training like Game Dev TV. I think I've seen a few others advertised, but like I said, I got that one off of Humble Bundle for like $20 or $25. So it's well worth it. You know, it wasn't that much money that I would regret it if I didn't work on the tutorial or didn't go through the coursework, but it was cheap enough that if I did get anything out of it, hey, that's a good investment. So anyway, I think Godot is a fantastic game engine. Is it the best engine out there? Probably not, but it's a good gateway into the rest, and it's a good learning platform. I don't know how much of this transitions over, but I would imagine that the game development concepts that you do, like for instance, this is just the game engine and just some scripting to make things move. That doesn't include, like we looked at Sprite for all the different, like, how many different sprites are in here? If I go look at the tile map on this, there's a lot of stuff here. There's all kinds of different styles of boxes. There's like the little rope bridge thing that's over here, the little signs and stuff. This is just a small portion. If you imagine Mario World or something like that, Super Mario and stuff, how big their tile maps would be. Like there's a lot of things out. This is just the game engine and just the coding of it. There's story, there's artwork, there's tile maps, there's a ton of stuff, the mechanics of it. Like I need to develop my idea before I present it as a video. And there's a lot there. When you really start digging into what it takes to develop anything, there's little pockets of stuff that you need to do here and there that are entire worlds of themselves. You know, I don't know, kind of getting away from the whole topic at hand, and I don't want this video to get too long, but I did want to talk about this. This has been a very interesting rabbit hole, and I would very much encourage anybody that's interested in game development to look at the Godot engine and tinker with it and see what you can do with it, because, and selfishly, I get a lot of cool games that other people develop. So anyway, this is just a little rabbit hole I wanted to dive into and just talk about, because I've had a lot of fun tinkering with it over the last few months, and I wanted to share it with everybody else. So anyway, that's going to do it for this video. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.